Hello, you are... that was a bit less professional than last week. You are listening and watching Where My Prose At with Ken Features and myself, Ken. Thank you for joining in. Today we're going to be discussing Stephen King's Apt Pupil, and this was a community choice.
Yep, by our very loyal and dedicated listener / best man at our wedding, Graham.
And best man at his wedding.
Oh yeah, and yes, best man at his wedding as well. I want to thank you, Graham, for putting in your suggestion. It was quite an interesting journey. But I just wanted to say before we started, you guys have no idea how lucky you are that we are here, because we have been so caught up in all the election palaver that we
totally forgot.
It was like 5:30. We're like, oh my gosh, don't we have something on?
we read the book and stuff, right? But I actually did the show art like 2 hours ago, so I had it in mind. We knew it was happening tonight, but 5:35. I walked in the door after walking the dogs, and Ken Features was like, "Don't we have the show on in like 25 minutes?" I was like, "We do." So yeah,
we've been too busy hitting the refresh on the election results.
Yes.
So hope you guys are all having a nice election day, or if you're not American, I hope that you're having a nice watching.
I hope you're amused watching democracy die.
It's so dramatic. But yeah, so on to our book today. So like we said, this is a community pick by our super dedicated star reader, Graham. Stephen King's Apt Pupil. Now, do you want to cover the plot, or shall I? I think you should probably cover the plot a little bit more.
I'm sure you could dive in and help me where I miss things and such.
Sure.
So this book, as a synopsis, is basically this kid in the 60s, 70s, who's young teen, but who is absolutely fascinated by the World War II.
But a very all-American kid, like Todd, I think his name is.
Yep.
He's just the kind of kid that you would live next door to. There's nothing strange about him. Well, I mean,
he's into sports. He gets girlfriends and stuff.
He has a loving family. His parents.
Straight A's at the start of the book, anyway.
Apt Pupil. That's where the title comes from.
His mother keeps calling him Apt Pupil, just repeatedly.
Because it was a comment on the report card, wasn't it? Yes. That she was quite taken with. So very apt pupil.
Indeed. And so because he was so taken by a World War II assignment one day for his history class or whatever, he noticed on the bus one day, after doing a crazy amount of work for a report where he got an A+, and it's the only A+ the teacher ever gave, he recognized one of the passengers on the bus is an ex-Nazi, and had escaped from persecution and ran away, and somehow managed to change his name and such and move to America eventually. A
sidebar, I have to say that part of how realistic it was, because I have a little bit of an idea about World War II history. And a lot of the Nazi commanders and high up officials who didn't commit suicide or weren't taken by when the war ended. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, by the Allies. They did escape to Argentina and used all these kind of like secret networks, and it was really interesting to kind of see that and kind of see that kind of like in just get played out in this fictional but very realistic story. And
yeah, they definitely played it. It felt very real. I mean, it is fiction, but I could have believed it took place in this world, because it was nothing particularly supernatural or anything about it, right? It was just...
That's Stephen King, isn't he? He is so good. He is a master. I think he's a master at writing.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying he's not a master
in these kind of mundane, everyday American settings.
He's very good at capturing American culture. He's really good at making it feel like an American town.
The Thomas Kincaid of horror.
But he does write a lot of supernatural books, and this is not one of them. This one is just a sort of horror of humanity, introspective horror, perhaps.
Scarier. It's pretty scary.
It's real.
Yeah, quite realistic.
So he finds out this Nazi's on the bus, and he starts stalking him, pretty much. He starts finding out where he lives, he finds out his roots, and he finds out what name he goes by, and then he eventually one day garners enough courage to knock on his door as he's delivering the papers or something, right?
Yeah, this kid has a paper route as well. Like, literally, I see what Stephen King was doing here with this kind of juxtaposition of this all-American ideal white privileged, young male,
and we have to mention the white privilege later on because there's actually a point in the book where, and this is when was this written?
I'm not exactly sure. I think it must have been in the 80s or the 90s.
I assume so. It's definitely based back then. Let me find out quickly because it's actually quite important to what I was going to say. Show me the film, of course. So there's a film adaptation.
Yeah, I've seen the film, actually.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
It's okay. It's good. It will give you nightmares.
Gray was telling me that it's got Ross from Friends as the teacher in it, which was kind of amusing.
I think that's kind of a
1982.
spot on, actually. The guidance counselor, I think that's a spot on casting. That's exactly how I would imagine him. This kind of goofy, I don't know, thinks he's doing more good than he is doing harm kind of character who's blind to the realities. Yeah,
that's very true. So the book was published in 1982, which I think is very appropriate. But one of the things that they keep mentioning is, it's shocking at the end of the book that they've, well, I don't want to give anything away just yet, but they keep mentioning that because of this juxtaposition that we're seeing, this apt pupil, this white boy from, Middletown, America, turned out to be, whatever we'll discuss in a moment. But the point is that the fact that he was a white boy and they kept repeatedly saying the fact that he's not black and the fact that he's not a woman or from some other country or whatever was really surprising because they wouldn't even have looked into him, right? They were shocked. And I think that's really appropriate for America, and especially in the past, right?
Is it the kind of the racial profiling does go both ways, and it's not right. I mean, we're all human. We're all people underneath the skin colors.
As this book shows. Yeah. So, we got to the point where he identifies him, he knocks on the door, and he basically confronts him and says, "I know who you are." And the Nazi kind of tries to play it off as like, "Oh, no, I'm
not me.
Not me.
Of course not.
I moved here like way after the war, and all I did was I can't remember. He said he worked in a factory or something. I didn't do anything like that. My wife died in the war. Why would I?"
I think he did work at a factory for a little bit after he lost all of his stocks in Argentina.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, he's obviously cherry picking. But he can't fool Todd, or as he refers to him as the boy, which is very dehumanizing. You can tell.
Intentionally, yeah. So, he goes to knocks on the door and he talks to him, says, "I know you're a Nazi." He tries to pretend that he's not, and the boy's like, "Look, I know you are. Here's pictures of you, and like here's all the evidence I've garnered. You're definitely a Nazi." And at this point, the Nazi's like, "Should I kill this boy? Should I just dispose of him and then move on? Have I been too careless?" And he has this like monologue in his mind where he considers all this. And basically he says, "What are you trying to blackmail me for?" And the boy says, "I'm not trying to blackmail you. I just want to hear all the gushy details," is how he phrases it.
Can I just say I felt that was a part in the novel that really kind of hit in a visceral way for me, is that I noticed that the first thing he said is he wanted to hear about the women.
Yep.
And, I just think for me, the way I read this novel, I actually didn't read all of it, and we will discuss that in a little bit, but the way I read the novel was Todd is kind of a stand-in for this new generation of America that's kind of fascinated with the cruelty of the Nazis, and that's where Todd to me is the neo-Nazi movement in kind of a fictionalized character.
I don't see him as that personally. Like, I actually don't see him as a Nazi, strangely enough. I know that's an obvious potential for the storyline.
Well, no, but the whole cruelty, whether it's regimented regimented by the Nazi government, or whether it's just someone running over a blue jay with their bike until it's mush.
Multiple minutes after it's mush. No, I see the Todd as... Well, I'll get to this later, but I personally see Todd not as a Nazi, but I see him as just a psychopath, because he's not so interested in the ideals of the fascism. He doesn't, hail Hitler. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He's just really in it for the killing. He just likes the killing. He gets off on it.
I think someone could genuinely write an entire thesis on
I'm sure they have.
Different psychological layers and metaphors for
inside
American culture inside it's not even a book, it's a novella. It's so sharp. It's a sharp little creature that just sinks its teeth into you.
So you read the book and I did the audiobook, right?
Yes.
So we have a slightly different view on how we perceive the book as well, because I heard it read to me by somebody who's already added inflections, right? So that can change my view. So we've been getting really slow through this, plodding through the storylines. We have a lot to say about this book. So he basically blackmails this old man in the end into telling him all these gushy details about what happened during the war. He wants to hear about all the various ways in which the Jews died. He wants to hear about what happened to all of their stuff that they owned and all this stuff. And at this point, I didn't really think of this kid as like super psychopathic Nazi guy in the making. So far, I just thought him as a bit of a weird kid who had this strange fascination at the moment. I mean, it's definitely weird, but he was so young at the time that I didn't necessarily give him that. I hadn't read the book before.
I think
didn't see
because
the
I
film.
had read the book years and years before that I kind of went into it with a different view.
I didn't give him I wasn't saying oh, he's a great kid. I didn't think that. I knew there was something going on. And
I also had Todd over for dinner.
Yeah, I knew by the synopsis of the book that it was going to get worse. But at that moment, I didn't feel like it was not recoverable, right? Okay, so he starts meeting with this old guy repeatedly, and he starts forcing him to tell him all these details about the war and over again, and the guy starts drinking heavily because he's struggling to think of all these memories.
And smoking.
And smoking a lot, yeah, because he sort of moved on with his life to an extent, and he's sort of accepted American culture to an extent.
I mean, obviously, and he does have, itchings from his past that he has to scratch.
But that's later. I think that's part of the plot, is that's awoken in him, right?
I know I would disagree with you there, because the way I read it is, okay, sorry, so we're going to do a really quick synopsis, because I cannot wait to actually get into discussing this book.
But it's hard because we don't discuss each bit.
But so basically this young boy and this Nazi form this kind of weird friendship, and they're parasites of each other. They're ramping each other up, they're feeding each other, and they're also taking from each other. It's this very disgustingly symbiotic relationship.
And it's worth calling a relationship and not a friendship, because they're not friends. They actually both consider repeatedly killing each other because of safety reasons and just for the fun of it, I guess.
But this relationship definitely awakens something, and things that were already there, it's like fanning the fire. But like I was going to say is that you might have missed it, and I pay very close attention to the animal abuse pages. Unfortunately, those really were very, very difficult to read. So the old man who he's sitting on his stoop, he has milk, and he's trying to entice this tomcat in, and he's got gloves, and he grabs the tomcat and he puts the tomcat in the oven, and he's burning the cat. But at the closing of that chapter, it tells you about how many match strikes had been on the side of the oven, and how he said he hadn't used the oven in another part of the book where he didn't use the oven.
I did not notice that.
And and I think also when the tomcat there's a discussion, he was like, as he had done before. So this is clearly he does graduate on. I agree with you where it ramps up, but he had, the way I read it is that with the match strikes and I've done this before, is he's been taking cats and
I think I just read that
animals.
I don't know how I read that. But that's really interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. And that's the good thing about talking to somebody who's also read the book, is you can find out different perspectives and things that you missed entirely, like in my case. So he starts killing animals, and so does Todd. Todd kills a blue jay outside the old man's house with his bike. He rolls over it again and again and again.
So can I just say, right? This is an excellent book, and you should absolutely read it. However, if you have trouble with animal abuse like I do, you can't. It's really difficult. It's not that it's gory or too graphic. It's more the plain, stark way that Stephen King portrays this complete lack of humanity and this cruelty, and it's very effective. And the cat and the blue jay happened too quickly for me, and then right after the blue jay, there's the old Nazi standing in the dog pound, And I don't know if you guys know anything about our personal lives, as we have 2 rescue dogs. Animal rights and animal welfare is a very important part of who I am, and I just couldn't do it after that. I checked out because there are real people in this world that don't read this novel as a fiction. They're like, oh,
a handbook.
Yeah, that's a handbook. So
yeah, and
seeing the ugly underface of cruelty it's difficult.
It is,
really
absolutely
difficult. It was really hard to read.
And in the end, you should always, like, reading a book in its entirety, if you're not enjoying it, you should never be forced to read a book all the way through if you're not enjoying it. And even worse, if you're actively, not just not enjoying it, but actively hating the experience due to some emotional reaction or however, nobody's forcing you to read that book. And, don't feel bad if you decide not to continue.
Know where your boundaries are. Don't be afraid to push them, but also know that it's okay if you reach the edge of where you are.
But the reason why it's completely legitimate that Kin Features is still to review this book is because she has read it before. Mm-hmm. So this is actually the second read that she decided, you know what, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I've read it before.
I didn't finish the last time, and I stopped at the cat part, and I got past the cat part this time, mm-hmm. So woohoo, there we go, testing boundaries and stretching them, so I'm very proud of myself.
Indeed. So they start killing animals, and that's very sad. And at the same time, Todd's grades start dropping massively, right?
And the uniform.
Oh yes, of course. The old Nazi gets a uniform from the boy that apparently is massively inaccurate. The buttons are in the wrong places, and the colors are in the wrong.
It goes on about the zipper doesn't even
fly.
Yeah,
it's clearly like a costume or something the kid's got, right? But he makes him wear it, and he makes him march around in it. But by the end of it...
But that is where,
the power switch happens there, though.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that you can
or
see,
starts.
Todd starts to realize that, I think like anybody who realizes when they're, getting too deep into this white supremacy and this, Nazi worship, is that it's dangerous. It's not, there's a certain point where
I don't think we explicitly stated that it is because of the... He was blackmailing him the whole time, right? He was blackmailing because he was going to say, I will tell the world you're a Nazi.
I have a letter with a friend if anything happens to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't kill me, and if you don't do as I say, I'm going to tell the world that you're a Nazi, right? But over time, and that's the turning point, is this power dynamic shifts because he sees this guy marching around and he sort of gets his confidence back. He realizes and remembers all the old moves and the old commands.
Sleeping in it, and that's the only way. He wasn't able to sleep before, and then he starts sleeping in it, and it's the only way he can sleep in these weird pajamas.
Yeah. And so that's when the power dynamic starts to shift, and it drifts, it goes back and forth a little bit here and there, but it definitely goes towards the Nazi. And so Todd's grades start to droop. They go from A's to B's to C's, and his mother and his father notice this, and they directly confront him and say, is this because you're visiting the old man too much? Mm-hmm. And Todd's like, no, definitely not. No, he needs me. I read to him, and he's blind, and he needs me, And he seemed to be this nice, charitable kid, and they're like, okay, well, so long as you get your grades are better for next time, that's fine. And they get worse again. So Todd starts amending the record and saying, those aren't C's, those are B's, or whatever, right?
But I think that every illicit act that Todd does, where it seems like, oh, it's just a kid who hasn't fudged their grades as a kid. But, it also kind of is paralleled in in the Nazi where, he used to forge documents to, take a little bit off, when he was sending the Jewish gold to Berlin, he'd take a little aside for himself. So I just think that it feels like every sin, every vice that Todd indulges in, and it, where filtered through Todd, it's very, kind of like, oh, it's just, it's just a kid. It's mirrored in the Nazi, and it showed that vice is vice.
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah. And it also shows that he's following the same kind of journey in some ways as well. His record is dropping, and he starts to change the figures on the report card to show his parents, but eventually his parents get a letter in the next report card saying that Todd's failing all of his classes now. He's getting F's and D's.
Well, his parents don't exactly get it, though.
Oh, they get sent a letter.
It was intended for his parents, but I don't think it ever made it.
He brings it to the Nazi instead and says, help, what do I do? And the Nazi says, in short, they basically decide that he'll pretend to be his granddad, go in to meet the school counselor, and try to convince that the parents are having some marital issues, and that's why he's not sleeping as much, and that's why his grades are drooping. His lack of sleep, by the way, is because he's having these horrific dreams of Jews being killed and women being killed and so on. He eventually has his first wet dream as well, imagining the rape of a young woman. Throughout the book, he references that original wet dream again and again as his go-to imagination thriller, right? So anyway, it turns out that the granddad successfully convinces the counselor of, yes, I'm the granddad, marriage problems at home, Todd's grades will improve, and I can assure you that if they haven't by the midterms, that we will make sure that the parents go to counselling to help them out and help Todd out as well. Otherwise, please leave them alone. Don't contact them. Right? That's the sort of middle ground agreement. He then fails again. So Todd fails again, even though the fake granddad, the Nazi, has been tutoring him and helping him, making sure he studies every day. Doesn't matter. He still starts to fail. So he manages to fix some grades up again, and over time things do improve. And it's all fine in the end. His grades keep going up. And eventually he becomes valedictorian of his class. Mm-hmm. So he becomes the best pupil, the most apt pupil.
Todd is a very apt pupil.
At this time, they both start getting hungers that are no longer being satisfied by killing animals. And they both, without communication and completely separately, kill hobos, homeless people, winos as he calls them. So the old man tricks them by offering change and in exchange for company for the night because he's very lonely, and he tricks them to come home on a public city bus, and takes them home and kills them simply and buries them in his basement. You look very sad by this.
I'm very
fiction.
sad. Of course, the poor rhinos, the poor blue jay. I mean, it's just the body count in this novel is very.
It does go up. And then the same thing happens with the boy. He goes and finds a wino that's hiding in some back alley somewhere, and he goes over and tries to talk to him a little bit, and then stabs him in the face and draws a happy smile on him, and then stabs 37 times, like he says, and then immediately goes home to masturbate.
I didn't make it this far in the novel, so this is all kind of new information to me. I'm just going to look at our cute little puppy there. Oh, isn't he sweet? Look at his little face.
You can't say that without showing it. That's not fair.
That's true. He's very cute. You just got to take my word on it.
Yeah. So this continues. Eventually, there's two separate issues which cause them to be found and to be uncovered. One is that the Nazi has a heart attack immediately after he finished killing a hobo in his basement. During this heart attack, he realizes he's having a heart attack, falls back onto a chair for 15 minutes, eventually manages to crawl up his stairs, call the boy, and the boy rushes over under the illusion of he needs to read a letter to the old man from his family in Germany. The first time in years. It's very important that he goes this late at night, and that's what he tells his parents. So he rushes over, and he sees the mess, and he's like, what have you done? Why is there so much blood? What's going on? And the guy says, you know what I've done. You know what I've done. Clean it up so that you can call an ambulance. And the boy's like, oh, well, I gotta do it. So he cleans up all the mess. He buries the body. He cleans up all the blood all over the linoleum in the kitchen. And then he calls an ambulance. And additionally, he thinks, what would a normal boy do? And he's like, oh, I better call my father and let him know, because that's what a normal boy would do.
It's just such a sociopath, statement.
He repeatedly
that mimicry of real human emotion.
Throughout the novella, he repeatedly frames his thoughts as what would somebody else do in the situation. When he's having sex with his first girlfriend, he has sex with her 5 separate times. The first 4 he manages to go by thinking about rape and murder and such. The 5th time he couldn't even get going. Because he wasn't interested in having sex with a living human being. It just didn't interest him. Anyway, so this wino has been killed, and the boy cleans it up, calls the ambulance, calls his dad, and then he thinks, wait, something feels off, there's something wrong. the letter. So he rushes around, asks the Nazi, like, do you have any letters that we can fake as just to have as a prop? And the Nazi says, yes, in my upstairs, check this old ottoman or something. So the boy runs upstairs, can't open it because it's locked, freaks out, he sort of bashes it open. I imagine there's papers everywhere, the thing's been damaged.
That's not suspicious.
Yeah, the thing's been damaged. He finds a random letter that's in German and brings it downstairs, because that'll do, right? It doesn't really matter what it says, because it's in America, nobody's going to read German. So the dad arrives just after that, so does the ambulance, takes the Nazi away to the hospital. And the boy then sneakily takes away the letter as well, after his dad has seen that it was there to prove that he was there for a reason. Okay. I'm going to tell the two stories that are kind of happening in parallel, separately, because I can't speak in parallel. So the old man goes to the hospital, and in the bed next to him is a Jew, a Polish Jew, who keeps thinking, I recognize that man in the bed next to me. And he, for several weeks, they become acquaintances, and they watch the TV shows together, Countdown or whatever, and eventually realizes what he recognized him for. He was the jailer in one of the not Auschwitz. It was
I don't remember exactly. It wasn't Auschwitz.
No,
that's the only one I can really remember.
Essen, I think or maybe that's the fake story. I can't remember.
No, that was a sausage factory where all the locals thought it was a sausage factory, but
I thought that was what he did. I don't know.
Oh,
it was one of the camps anyway. It doesn't really matter which one. So he really recognizes him because that's where his daughters and his wife perished under him, and he remembers this whole nightmare. So he doesn't spill the beans the next morning. He keeps quiet, and after having the nightmare, there's this Jewish guy, and he runs off. I managed to get out of the hospital and managed to alert the authorities. The FBI then go in and try to arrest him. He says, you don't know who I am. I'm not really a Nazi. I'm just a nice old man. The FBI are like, well, you're under lockdown now, and they keep an eye on him, but not close enough. He manages to sneak off to a supply cupboard, gets himself a bunch of pills, and doses himself and falls asleep and perishes himself.
Coward's way out.
Coward's way out, yeah. On the way out, I should mention, this is a very important part of the theme of the book, all these dreams they were having throughout the novella, where they kept both saying, I have these horrible dreams, couldn't sleep, and they got worse if they didn't kill, and then when they killed, they got worse later on. As he's drifting off, he thinks, finally I can escape these dreams and sleep soundlessly forever. And then a thought strikes him, what if the dreams are still there? And he has this panicked moment where he says, no, I don't want to sleep. I can't sleep. I'm going to have these dreams.
Good.
And then he feels like these fingers dragging his mind down into the darkness where the dreams await. Implying, not necessarily hell, but implying that he's going to be, tortured in some kind of afterlife, which is a kind of nice thought for a Nazi.
Incredibly fitting for the tomcat.
Yes.
For also for the
and all the dogs people. and the hundreds of thousands of Jews that he killed. Yes. So at the same time, the boy is found to basically the counselor who originally met the Nazi granddad guy realizes that, wait a minute, that guy who's in the newspaper who was found dead and was actually a Nazi. Didn't I interview him a couple of years ago?
Can you imagine though? Like you're just a guidance counselor, you're just doing your job, and this old grandfather comes in, he seems really interested in his grandson, then all of a sudden, I don't even.
Statistically, every single one of us has met somebody who's either done murder or rape or whatever. And
that's what happens when Ross Geller moves away from New York City.
That was the actor of the film. Yes, Hando says punch all Nazis. Indeed. At this point, the counselor says, "Oh, that's weird. I'm going to go look into this because this is suspicious to me." And he's like, "I don't know why. I'm just going to follow this thread. I'm in town at the time. I'm going to go check out." So he goes to visit Todd's parents to ask them questions about the granddad. And Todd's parents are not in, but Todd is, who's polishing his gun. Polishing his rifle. So
glad that Todd is able to get a gun. Isn't that just great? Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Super excited about that.
Yeah. Love that system. In the film, Graham was telling me that this is where he doesn't have a gun, and Todd tells him, "You better not tell anyone or I'll be mad." Which is so dumb, by the way. I don't want to watch this film. In the book, he just raises his gun and shoots him in the face, then shoots him in the spinal cord, and shoots him through the heart, while the guy murmurs his daughter's name. And then he said, at this point, after killing the guidance counselor, he feels so good. He closes his eyes, looks up and breathes and goes, ah, and it says it's the best pleasure he's had in his life. It doesn't state.
Oh, come on! How can you top the wet dream about the dead? You know,
the rape and everything.
Yeah, the dead rape girl or whatever it is. The Todd's.
But it implies that's the greatest pleasure of his life, implying that he has an orgasm there and then. So it's a horrible part of the story, and this is the last page of the book now. It basically says that at this point Todd realizes, well, they're coming for me, so he goes out and kills endlessly for 7 hours before they get him. I don't think it says whether he dies or not at that point, but they've got him anyway. So, and that's the book. Lovely, cheery story about.
So final thoughts.
What was that?
Final thoughts.
Yes, we are at the end. Well, my rating, I gave this 4 stars because I'm trying to do a system where I'm not just going to try to say if I can't find any faults, I'll give it 5. I'm trying to say if I would read it again. I would not read this book again simply because I don't think I'll ever forget it. You don't need to read it again. It is a classic. It is a masterpiece.
It is an unforgettable book.
It is yeah. It's I think
choice, Graham.
I think Stephen King links really well into this mindset of what it was like in post-World War II America. Again, the American culture is perfect and apt. I think he's really good at getting the mindset of both the old Nazi and the young psychopath.
For me, just for my final thoughts on the book, obviously, like I said, I didn't finish it, which is why thank you, Ken, for finishing out the plot synopsis there.
Apologies for taking all the time to do that.
It's okay. For me, I don't know. I think for me, I have a bit more of an emotional connection to the book. When I first read it, there were some rough things going on in my life, and so for me, it was very difficult to kind of get back into that headspace, but it was still an excellent book. I actually was very upset at myself that I couldn't finish it because it's just something that you want. It is the most grotesque artistic portrayal of cruelty, and you cannot look away from it. And it just, to understand that we're all humans, we're all the same, we're all the same species, but to have such differences, for me, the differences is like psychopaths and serial killers and, people that can have this cruelty in them. I genuinely don't understand how we are the same species. I don't get it.
And I think that's also an interesting point because clearly the Nazis have the opinion that Jews are a separate species from the rest of humanity.
Yeah, the Jewish people. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, it was a fantastic read, and that was very well said. I think that was a very good overview as well. So
good plot synopsis.
We do recommend reading this book. The audiobook was fantastic, I should mention. I wouldn't say it was, it wasn't perfect. I didn't notice any issues, but I didn't think to myself, wow, this is amazing either. It was fine. There was no major issues or anything.
The book gave me nightmares. I was up till 2 a.m. reading it one night, and I had apt pupil level nightmares.
If a book can cause your subconscious to crank around repeatedly throughout the evening and throughout the night, and it can have such a visceral emotional reaction that it can give you, that means it's probably written well, right?
I know. I don't understand it. How I can. I like this book. I think this is an amazing book, but I would never want to read it again, ever. Yeah. Never.
It's a bit like Lolita in that sense, right?
But I love Lolita. That's a whole different discussion. Lolita is actually one of my favorite books, and we will probably discuss it on this show because I have lots of thoughts and opinions.
So for me personally, I draw the analog with Lolita because they're both books that I think you should read, and they're both books that I will never read again. Personally,
I read Lolita probably every 5 years or so. It is absolutely one of my favorite books. I have, like I said, a lot of thoughts and opinions, but we will save that for another show.
Absolutely. Just
want to thank you so much, Graham. We really appreciate your engagement. In fact, we appreciate all of you guys. Hando, Beck, Alexis, Asland, if you guys are listening, we really appreciate you. Do we know what we're reading next week?
No, we didn't come up with a decision for next week.
It's your choice.
It is my choice.
The pressure.
We have 2 comments as well. Hando says, did the reader of the audiobook do character voices? Kind of. I mean, he changed the tone for each voice, so I would say yes. They weren't massively different though, especially the feminine ones. When it's a male narrator, some go really kind of extreme into trying to make it sound feminine. Others just do a slightly heightened voice.
I find that with the female. I'm currently reading The Last Mrs. Parrish while I'm listening to it, and she's doing the boy voice, and I'm like, oh, honey, can you just do it in your normal voice?
Does she do it like this?
She's like, no. And you're just like, oh dear, it doesn't work. It kind of takes you out of it.
It depends, right? Some narrators are really good.
Some narrators are really good. I mean, she's a great narrator, but like, it's just she's trying to do the abusive husband voice, and it's
okay.
Oh, it just makes you laugh, and you don't want to be laughing during these like horrible scenes. But anyway, so next week we will let you guys know what we're going to be reading.
Keep an eye on our social media.
It's Ken's choice, so we really don't know. I
don't even know.
He doesn't even know.
Our last comment is from Graham, who says, Summer of Corruption is the subtitle, Different Seasons. Yes, Different Seasons is sort of like the omnibus of the 3 novellas that are linked together.
That's the one I checked out, and I was only reading Apt Pupil, but I might read the other ones as well.
Yes, I think they look good.
Have you read the other ones, Graham? Are they any good? Would you suggest them? Let us know.
So we'll let you know on social media what we're reading next week. We're sorry the show has gone on for 5 minutes overtime, but this has been a really... there's so much to uncover here, and honestly, we could probably do 2-3 hours on this, no problem.
Really. Like I said, I was not kidding when someone could do their thesis on just the different psychological layers and cultural layers to this.
Mm-hmm.
But I would never read it again.
I think one could write...
I wouldn't do my thesis on it.
I think one could write more words describing and discussing the book than could be in the book. Quite easily.
So powerful.
Yeah. So
powerful. Just like, bam.
Yeah.
Not for the faint-hearted.
Thank you for listening in. You've been listening to Where My Prose At.
Where they at?
Which is such a fun title to say. With Ken Features and myself, Ken. Thank you so much for listening. And you can find us all over our social medias. That includes the Twitter down here, which is VTW Show X. My personal Twitter is Dr. Ken Reed. Do you want to give your one?
I don't use my Twitter that often. I do have one. I think it's Kitten Features 48. If it is, tweet at me. I probably won't tweet back, but you know.
She won't even know.
I won't even know, but it will go somewhere.
We also have an Instagram down here somewhere, down there.
Excuse me, sir.
It is down there. So be sure to, we use that constantly for the show art and updates every single week, so go check that out. Also for our other show as well, for Show X. You can also find us on patreon.com/showx for a minimum of $1 donation per month. That keeps the show afloat. It does not go into anything else. It
buy us tea.
Lets us... No, it's not for tea. It's for like microphones and
you can still
lighting.
Buy us tea, though, if you want it.
Well, no, don't do that.
Okay,
and also,
don't buy us tea.
Up here, you can also get a free audiobook if you click there. Well, you can't click on it, but if you type it in...
so professional.
I know. If you type that in, you get a free audiobook on Audible, and we get a very tiny kickback, but every little helps. You can also find us on Facebook, search for Show Space X, and you'll find us on there. Yeah, you can also find us on reddit.com/r/showx. And you can also find us on Goodreads. If you are interested, keep an eye on the other social medias. There's links there to it. It's
That's
easier.
Probably the best one to go to. We checked the Goodreads one. We were trying to use Goodreads more, so come join us on Goodreads, and we can continue the discussion that we've been having here. If you guys have any other thoughts, anything that you want to talk about in the book club, please send it in the Goodreads.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we will be back next week with more. Thank you so much. Very much appreciate it. Bye.
Bye, guys.